Good morning, my community. This is another Wakanda. This is another installment of Direct Impact from your brother Hubert Naeem Roberts, chairman of Black Lives Matter. As always, my number is 810-394-4105. Mentor Roberts at mentorrobertsgmail.com is my email. We always are looking for members to join Black Lives Matter.
I just sent it to you.
Okay, we're always looking for members to join, people to join Black Lives Matter. My engineer was talking earlier about the work. Why isn't the work being done in our community? And many times the work is not being done in our community because number one, we have no real knowledge of our history, and because we lack the understanding of our history, we don't know how we're supposed to be engaging in this work to make this work do what it should be doing for our community. Meaning, how do we build? How do we build on our resources? How do we make things happen in our community like they are happening in other communities? And one thing that we have to get back to doing is the foundation of loving each other, and really being engaged in doing the work. I want to say, always, I want to, impart upon our community to love someone, to really engage another person, to try to forgive, and to work for peace and understanding. One thing we got to be serious about when violence is present, we meet violence with violence. You got to be clear about that. Today I'm going to take you down. I'm going to give you some history. I'm going to give you some background, foundational information as always. We have to understand where we come from, the greatness that we are as a people, and not to disparage anyone else. We always want to understand the relationship with history and contemporary time because they're all in the same. It's what we are committed to do with it. Africa, or the African continent, or however you want to define it, is the real birth of mankind. The kingdoms and empires are too many to mention, which produce most of the foundations of life on planet Earth today. We can go back to the Kemetic people, Kemet, Kush, Ethiopia, just to name a few of the ancient civilizations that was phenomenal. But as I said before, audience, there are too many to mention because we look so finite or linear as what we see on our television or our YouTube or our TikTok. We don't understand that there's thousands and thousands of years of information and civilizations that have rose and fell that produce art, language, science, healthcare, everything music, everything you can imagine that we experience today started somewhere. It just didn't fall out the sky. But for the context of our conversation that we're having, it's going to be, I'm going to give some background so you guys know somewhat of this compendium. I'm going to give a background. I want to give some foundation because it's always important to give foundation to what we're discussing today. Our topic today is going to be around the towns, the enclaves, and the settlements that were all Black after 1865. Because you got to remember, before 1865, and numbers, I'm going to be giving you guys some numbers, and I want you guys to research this because it's very important. A lot of times when we look at history, you got to go by the information and get the receipts. Because if you understand this country was taken from people that was already here, number one. We come from the descendants of African people that had a whole way of life before coming to this continent that we were forced to come. It wasn't no forced exodus as they try to lay out now and changing and trying to manipulate history. They're trying to lie about history, talking about forced exodus. It was enslavement, the worst kind on the planet Earth, number one. Number two, I want you guys to continue to stay with me so I don't lose you guys in some of these dates, and I will frame it in a way that I'm hoping that you can understand it. I am going to give a foundation here because it's very important to start off with the facts. 1480. 1480, Portuguese were the first Europeans to land on the west coast of Africa. 1652, the Dutch East Indian Company landed in South Africa. What happened next until today is heartbreaking. Millions and millions of Black Africans were killed, their land stolen, their resources stolen, their lives were uprooted. But all that did not happen without a fight. I just want to make that clear, guys. We did not go into enslavement without fighting tooth and nail from day one. So we're going to be discussing around the 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, because this is the foundation of the crimes against mankind. So we're putting it in that context. So some of you guys have heard 1492, right? Remember that? The 12 people landed in Plymouth Rock. You know, they talk about Plymouth Rock. Malcolm said Plymouth Rock landed on us, but we were here way before 1492. But for this discussion, I'm going to bring up 1492, 1619, 1776, the ratification of this so-called Constitution, 1880. In 1880, they ended the importation of enslaved humans to America, and they started breeding us because British outlawed enslaved importation of slavery. So again, I want you guys to understand the relative of these numbers and these dates, because it's going to help explain my context. Between 1526 and 1670, 1526 and 1670, Spanish expeditions entered South Carolina, which created the Gold Coast, which was King Rice. At one time, Charleston, South Carolina, and the Sea Islands were the harbingers of the world, meaning that area was because of what they were producing, this grain of rice and indigo and cotton. But this particular grain of rice that was produced in the Sea Islands was sold all around the world. And those were West Indian Africans, and they are ancestors are the Gully and Geechee people. And in that area, I don't know if any of you guys understand this, but Sullivan Island is off the shores of South Carolina. It was Africans' Ellis Islands, to put it in terms that you guys might understand. And again, listen, this is 1526, between 1526 and 1670. And then you got the largest port for enslaved Africans coming into America was South Carolina. Y'all think about that. The largest port in North America that Black people came through was South Carolina. And at one time, again, all of us that's here today, all of us ancestors did come through that particular area. Most of us, I'm not going to say all, but most of our ancestors came through that port. And again, let's remember in 1850, in South Carolina at this time, guys, listen to these numbers. All this, Black people are enslaved. 57% of South Carolina was Black. 57% of South Carolina was Black. Most of the people in South Carolina were of African descent, Black. And again, you know, they're being raped by white people. So, you know, they had the mulattoes and all that crazy stuff going on. But at the time, in proportion to numbers, Africans descendants in America outnumbered whites 2-1. Now, some of the rebellion at that time, Denmark Vesey, in 1882, staged one of the first rebellions that took place, guys. Again, let's remember this, man. Again, I don't want us to miss what we're talking about. We just didn't walk into being enslaved and we were cool about it. We always have been fighting against that. So again, stay with me with these dates. It's very important. And some of the language I'm using, I want you guys to be clear about, because they are trying to lie about history. They're trying to soften the language about forced enslavement or immigration and all these little soft terms, as opposed to brutally dehumanizing another human being, being able to kill them, destroy them, beat them, whatever they wanted to do to them, they were allowed to do it. Now we're getting to 1712. In 1712, there were 10 Africans that were living in Louisiana. In 1712, guys, there were 10 documented African living in Louisiana or New Orleans, Louisiana. So that's important. In 1791, the Haitian Revolution took place. In 1803, the Louisiana Compromise, they purchased, you remember guys, because this is very important. They sold the French, Napoleon sold, because Napoleon owned Louisiana, Missouri, and all that area at that time. And he sold it to help support and finance the war that he was waging in the Caribbean and at home. And so one of the first largest rebellions in America took place in 1811 in Louisiana, New Orleans, Louisiana. So that's very, very important for us to keep in this context. 1860. What happened in 1860? 1860 in South Carolina, the Civil War began. And the Civil War, no matter what anybody want to tell you, was over enslaved people. White power exploitation. White people viewed us as nothing but animals, property to be used at will. It was all about economics. And the North, so again, even though this 13 colonies, and you had those states that succeeded, meaning the Confederacy was formed because they wanted to maintain their way of life or their Confederate heritage, as they like to say. They want to say this is our heritage and our way of life is to own human beings, and they do all the work and we do nothing. We just profit from them. Again, this is the foundation of capitalism in this country too. So again, it's very important that we understand these dates. 1771. Remember, 1771, guys. So I done started at 1418. Now I'm at, and remember, I talked about the 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th century. So these are hundreds of years that we're talking about. What happened in 1771? 1771 was the start of the New York Stock Exchange. And the first item that was sold on the New York Stock Exchange were enslaved Africans. And it's so important for us to really, really, really hold into that and understand the power of us, our bodies, or our ancestors being the first commodity sold on this thing that they popularized all over the world, and other countries have their stock exchange too. But the first commodity was enslaved human beings. Now I'm getting to our discussion today, which I was asked to really, I want to give some back history because I think it's very important that we understand our history, because our history impacts our presence and how we view and moving forward. Because when we look at some of the greatness of those things that happened in the past, we can understand a little bit about where we are today and then figure out how we can move forward. That's the whole purpose of history. How we can do some things differently where we don't repeat it. That's the foundation of history. And then history, again, can be subjective, meaning people lie because they want to control the narrative, which is propaganda. And they have done a lot of that over the centuries very, very well. That's why it's so important to counter information, making sure you have checking your resources. You have to double check all your resources. Now, for this conversation that my engineer asked me to talk about, which is very important, between the late 18th and early 20th century, there were more than 1,200 Black settlements, enclaves, towns that were created by Black people. 500 had the elements or institutions of a town. So just because you have a hamlet, a village, what goes into a real town when you talk about sewage and electrical grids, and even back then, the sewage and how a town is formatted was so very important, guys. So don't give me, and a lot of that information that we're talking about early on in the 18th and between the 18th and 20th century, we had been doing that thousands of years ago. So we understood how to lay out communities because our ancestors had already did it in ancient Egypt, ancient Kemetic, Nubia, Ethiopia, Sudan, all that. They had an understanding of how to aquifers and the water running in and moving waste out, you know what I mean? And being part of the natural environment where they wasn't polluting and they wasn't destroying the environment. Many of our ancestors, especially in ancient history, were engaged in the community or in the environment in a healthy way. They weren't exploiting and abusing the natural resources. So they understood how to move waste and water in and out of their homes, even thousands of years ago, guys. That's how powerful that is. So, but relatively, what we're talking about today, to understand us today, as far as y'all got to get this clear. Black people had no rights to nothing. To nothing, guys. We made something out of nothing because we were enslaved. Y'all got to get that. And I think that's something we so caught up in TikTok. We don't get this, guy, and we blame one another for some failures. But it's a collective failure to some degree about us not sticking together. But we have been under attack. So when you think about being denied resources, we have set up communities, and our communities were denied opportunity to be whole communities. So for this conversation, let me continue on. Between 1865, which is at the end of the Civil War. So let's get this clear. Civil War started in 1860. So 1865, that's 5 years later for all of doing the math, guys. So that so-called Emancipation Proclamation that the lie that Lincoln and all that mess, because it really didn't free us to any degree of in the minds of those that control the powers that be. It was pseudo and it was an illusion. But for this conversation, let's go there. So between 1865 and 1920, 1865, 1920, former enslaved people, that means former people that were enslaved, created over 50, listen to this, towns and settlements in Oklahoma alone, in one state. Between 1865 and 1920, Black people that look like me and you, along with some white allies, created over 50 towns in one state. That's powerful, y'all. That's powerful. I want y'all to sink in today. Y'all got to get this, man, because it's history, and I want y'all to double check this history. It's so important because my technician asked me to come, my engineer asked me to come here and speak about our communities. Many of our communities, most of us have no knowledge of. And so I'm going to bring some light on a lot of our communities that were created, running healthy, and was destroyed intentionally. Literally bombed, flooded, and burned down. And thousands of people died. And then you wonder why we in this state that we're in today. You wonder why we're so easy of us it's so easy for us to be jealous of Karen Weaver, of Mayor Neely, City Council, all of the puppets that's being, because you think about power. So there's a hierarchy in power. You got people controlling as a puppeteer, the puppets at the bottom. And everything that they're doing is about money. Everything that happened, guys, I don't care who you are right there listening to me right now. You're listening to me, but I bet you're thinking about your electric bill, maybe your mortgage, vacation, college fund, your groceries. All these kind of things are taking place, guys. We live in a capitalistic society. And because from day one, we have never benefited in this country from being whole human beings. When you talk about whole human beings and you in a system that is diametrically opposed to your existence, and that's how you produce a Neely. That's how you produce an NAACP that's done nothing. That's how you produce a Black Lives Matter that's crippled. because people won't come join and help because they listen to all this other noise that's going on. Oh, they the boogeyman. Anytime we talk about anything for Black liberation, we turn a side eye on. But when it's white liberation or white or Detroit Lions, y'all go for that. When it's the DDA or back to the bricks, anything another culture wants to do, you guys are on board for that. But when it comes time for us pushing us, we won't push us and support us. And even when some of us, even with me, I am here and I'm not above criticism and redirection. I want help. If I'm doing something wrong, I'm not too proud to say, I made a mistake. Let me go back and change this. Even our people that's supposed to be wards or when you got the city council, if you got council members that are over wards, should listen to the constituency or the residents and making sure the residents are being healed. How do we use this pool of money? Because think about it, a municipality get their money from where? Tax base. You destroy the tax base, what do you have, guys? If you destroy the tax base, what do you have? And taxes come in many forms. Even when you think about consumer powers, your water, your lights, your heating, grocery stores, your gas. Y'all think about property taxes. All these little things go into a pot that define what kind of services you're going to get. And they've always tried to make sure that we was the boogeyman because we're some crazy people from outer space. So let me go back to, before I go out on a tangent, again, between 1865 and 1920, former enslaved people, just in one state alone, which is Oklahoma, created over 50 towns and settlements. And earlier I told you there's different elements to what a real town as opposed to a village or a hamlet really is. Now, between 1865, listen to this, 1865 and 1857, Seneca Village, which became New York Central Park, was home to Black people. And white people took it from Black people that were there. Remember, Seneca Village was a Black village or a hamlet in New York City, an eminent domain, or whatever they chose to do. They took that community away from Black people and created what is now today Central Park. In 1865, Natchez, Mississippi. 1865, get this, guys. Natchez, Mississippi. Over 20,000 Black people were starved to death in 1 year by the Union Army, intentionally. In 1865, guys, in Natchez, Mississippi, over 20,000 men, women, and children were starved to death by the so-called Union Army. Not the Confederate Army, the Union Army. Because a lot of times we get it conflated. Many of those Unionists or people up north was just as racist as the Confederacy were. So let's make that clear. In 1877, the Federal Compromise ending Reconstruction that was helping Black people to gain real freedom through ownership of land and businesses was destroyed. That protection was taken away. When that compromise was made in 1877, that destroyed all our protection, meaning had the Reconstruction stayed in place, guys, this whole country would be different. Because when you think about where do you get your wealth from, you get your wealth from your land, from your legacy. So when you recycle that land, that house, and again, mortgage, and you build up equity in that, that's how you're able to gain wealth. That's how white people have gained wealth in this country. They were given free land, and they capitalized on free land. That's how many white people in this country didn't do anything to get the money they got today. The money they got today is because they were white. They was given free land from people that was already here. So let me make this clear. In 1865, Natchez, Mississippi, massacre took place. Over 20,000 Black men, women, and children were intentionally starved to death by the Union Army. 1898, Wilmington, North Carolina, whole Black community was destroyed and taken over by white people. 1898. 1919, Ellen, Arkansas, another community. 800 Black people were killed, town burned down. 1919, Chicago, Illinois, a community of Chicago, Illinois, on the south side. 38 Black people were killed, and the community on that south side of Chicago was burned down. In 1920, Ochi, Florida, massacre. 50 Black people were killed after voting. In 1921, y'all heard of the Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre? Over 1,000 Black men, women, and children were killed and destroyed, and the town was burned down to the ground, guys. And I think one of the last, she was 102 last year, died, and they had been fighting for years trying to get reparations and still didn't get a dime. But they're still fighting the descendants are still fighting today. In 1923, Rosewood, Florida, another town, a Black town, over 1,000 Black men, women, and children burned to the ground, guys. Y'all think about that, man. And in Rosewood, and even a lot of these things started and were destroyed based on jealousy and envy. They lied and said a Black man touched, or especially like in Rosewood, you know what I mean? And, just lie. Just the white women lie and all that kind of stuff, like with Emmett Till. Okay. 1950, Oscarville, Forstad County, Georgia. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with Georgia. Forstad County, Georgia it was on Oprah Winfrey. It's one of those communities down in Florida, in Georgia, that is all white. And they get federal dollars being all white. And they're not ashamed of it. They get backing and support. Well, get this. In 1950, what happened there is there was a Black community there called Oscarville. It was a farmland, businesses, everything. The white people built a dam and flooded their community, killed over 1,000 Black men, women, and children, just flooded it to make a dam for fishing, boating, and all that for white people. And the number of Black people that were literally killed is unknown. Now that's in Georgia. In Forstad County right now today is 97% white. They get a lot of federal dollars. It's one of the most expensive communities in America. And they are proud of their KKKism and Trumpism, however you want to conflate it. But that's another example of a Black community that I guess many of you guys never heard of, that was destroyed intentionally by the white power structure with the backing of the government, American government. And that was Lake, when they when they built the dam, it became Lake Lanier. Some of you guys may look it up. It's called Lake Lanier. There's some powerful documentaries on it. What they did was horrific. And even in some of my research, I knew about this in school, but I updated some of my research for this podcast, and some of the language. I remember some of the language we had when we were in school, and how when I was researching some stuff, they're changing the language to not allow another culture of people that perpetrated or produced this injustice. They have softened the language for them not to be victimized or to feel like they were perpetrators, but they were the perpetrators. 1968. In 1968, Orangeburg, South Carolina. Carolina's was hot, man. Massacre happened. Another community. Black people were in Greensboro, South Carolina, same thing. Black people were killed in 1985. I don't know if some of you guys remember the MOVE movement in Philadelphia. The whole block was burned down. So in context to our conversation, why we are highlighting this information. So remember, you got 1865. So going back to 1492, or however you all want to preference it, 1492, Black people had no rights, no power, nothing. They couldn't do nothing. Nothing, guys. So let's make this clear. And then, even though they couldn't do nothing, they were fighting and they were rebelling, which a lot of times it's recorded, but most history and most classes don't teach it because, again, you're highlighting what a government intentionally did to a group of people to keep them in check, meaning to keep them in a box so they couldn't flourish. So remember, Black people in this country, no matter what you want to say, guys, have been denied opportunity. Those are the facts. Many times when we look around, and even my engineer was saying earlier about it, when we speak out, like Dr. King spoke out. What happened to Dr. King? Malcolm spoke out. Fred Hampton, Mark Clark, Huey P. Newton, Fannie Lou Haven. I mean, the list goes on and on and on about us pushing back on being killed and denied opportunities for the simple reason of the color of our skin. Where we have communities that are literally cut off with ordinance and policy and everything and saying, you won't get any services, but you still got to pay taxes. You won't get any opportunities in your community, so you guys got to go to the underworld, which many times we, in certain parts of our culture, we've had to do some things out of the rip or, from the ground up. You're talking about the bootstrap. We down on the ground and had to make something happen out of nothing, guys, because this country called America denied us any opportunity. And don't get a felony. Don't get a felony, because that whole 13th Amendment with that compromise was a trick. And not right now, they using that intentionally. In the South, they lock people up intentionally for free labor, guys. They're doing that now. So in this discussion, I want us to be clear. In 1865, after the Civil War, almost a day afterward, guys, Black people were industrious, entrepreneurs. They wanted to be on their own. They wanted to do their own thing. And up to 1877, between 1865 and 1877, with the Freedmen Bureau and Reconstruction, we did some awesome things in a very short time, becoming congressmen and senators and everything that you can imagine.
What do you feel about this question?
Lincoln even said to them to be free just somewhere else. That's right. Yeah, Lincoln had no love for Black people. So again, and that's why it's so important to read Lincoln's papers. A lot of times if you read the Gettysburg Address, Lincoln made it very, very clear, y'all, that he was compromising with the Confederacy because all he was concerned with was keeping the Union together. So he didn't really free anybody. His thing was making sure that to win the war, he needed bodies to win the war. So he made a deal. And the deal was, you Black people come on and fight this fight, and I'm going to, give you some emancipation, but not total emancipation, because after 1877, Andrew Jackson gave back all of the Confederates, all of those slave owners got their plantations back and their slaves back because they came in. It's called sharecropping. Y'all think about that, guys. So Lincoln, when Barack Obama and them want to call out Lincoln and all that, if you really study Lincoln was a capitalist and an opportunist. His goal was to keep this country together because he knew that it would totally be destroyed on the base of the mistreatment, the enslavement of other people. And so he calculated, and he gave that illusion, and which a lot of what Lincoln did then, we're suffering from today, because the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment really messed us up. Many of us wasn't clear about what they were doing, because again, you got to think about it. We were denied for 350 years, guys, any form of education, any form of personhood, any form of foundational understanding, any form of opportunity building. We were culturally conditioned to believe, because if we was not, how is it that we are working every day for a person or in the field? You got thousands of people in a field working, and you got a few people on horseback with guns, and you don't kill them people on horseback. Yeah, they may shoot a few of you, but how is it that you feed and cooking for a plantation community? You cooking for your plantation owner and don't poison them. Your plantation owner is coming in and boning your sister, your mother, your brother, and your cousin. And as a man, you don't do nothing. You wonder why we're in the state we're in today. This is pretty much why, guys, is because we were cut off from our African culture. Had we not bought into that lie about voodoo and witch doctor and all that kind of stuff, because believe it or not, all those people that was connected to the universe was doing us good work. All those people that were engaged in understanding the spirits, because we are spirit beings, but they want to demonize voodoo. They want to demonize us getting together and singing, and the drum, the beat of our hearts, how we mash together, even though we on those slave ships, hundreds of us, different languages. But one thing that we had in common, guys, we had an essence about who we are as being part of the creation of the universe. And because many times we didn't see each other as colors at all, we saw each other from a nationality point. You are Congolese, or I'm an Angolan, or Sudan, or Ethiopian. You know what I mean? And we all had some things in common. And that's what then happened to us in this country. We've got so far away from chasing things and not wanting to be a part of human beings. And this is what I'm trying to share with you guys, with my engineer wanted me to bring out. In 1865, after the end of the Civil War, almost the next day, men and women started looking for their loved ones, man. They started walking hundreds of miles trying to find those people that they have been cut off from. Didn't know. I mean, they had some direction, to Star, North Star. We profound people, so we figured some stuff out, even without a map. Show you how bad. See, that show you how bad we are. Even without a map, guys, we would go get our people. And today, we want to chew each other up, and not, even if I don't agree with you, we should be agreeing with the liberation of each other. Even if we don't agree with how we're going to get up this mountain, I might not like how you move, but I don't have to cut your throat. Even with Neely and City Council, there should be some capitulation, right? So if you are not focused on the liberation of Black people and not being ashamed about that, and in a duality or plurality, you're saying, well, I'm a mayor and I have to think about everyone. Well, even being a mayor, there are some people that are less fortunate than others. They should be looked after a little bit more. And you shouldn't have to deny it or be ashamed of it. See, that's real leadership. Even if I decide to run for city council, if I'm going to sit on the city council or a commission seat, or at a district level, or a senator or congressman, what is my purpose? And most of us don't realize we didn't take political science. You didn't take political science. You don't understand what it means to be in politics. Politics is about moving resources. This community get resources, this community don't, because somebody gonna suffer in capitalism. So if you got a collective community that's coming together and forming an idea. So we got an idea. Before it become a bill and go to the House and become law, it's an idea. Like abortion and all that started with an idea. Then they formulated a document and said, okay, then how can we get these billionaires or millionaires to push this, lobby this through? How can we lobby seatbelts? They had to lobby seatbelts. They weren't going to just put seatbelts. The auto industry wasn't buying no seatbelts. They had to lobby for that, for safety, because so many people was getting killed, y'all. So a lot of times we don't want to be understanding about policies and about not being ashamed of being Black. And so this whole discussion is around, and I'm just hoping that there's some insight on how powerful we were and how powerful we are. But in this context, after 1865, Black people built communities off their backs and love for one another without getting much help from anybody else. They wasn't getting no real help from the federal government. They got a little help from the Freedmen Bureau, but not much, guys. A lot of it was because they had an understanding of being here for 350 years. They understood crop. They understood their hands, working with their hands. They understood what they were doing and how to produce. So when you understand how to produce, collectively working together, so you can make sure you're getting the resources, because they were selling it overseas to other countries. You know what I mean? And then you got a few, Rockefeller, Carnegie, and all those other people that own, Standard Oil, and all them people were carpetbaggers. So they had a lock. They had a lock on the industry. So again, since we were babies, just coming out the womb in 1865, we built over 1,200 towns, enclaves, and settlements. And again, I want y'all to understand there's a different elements that go on what makes up a real town. You got different institutions foundationally that when you are considered or you are chartered as a town, meaning the infrastructure, the roads, the sewage system, the electrical grid, and all that kind of stuff. You a foundation for tax purposes, because for a municipality to run, you got to have a tax base. So again, people got to pay into the municipality, and again, the city, which build up the revenue, it creates better, decent roads, and then you take advantage of what is the local or the national industries, right? And for us at one time, it was the carriages, the horse and carriage and the buggy. Then it became automobiles, right? Because if you look at Flint and why Flint is in the dregs that it's in today, is not accident. My engineer said early, no leadership. And I have to agree with him, because there's no way in the world that General Motors should have been allowed to do what it did to Flint. That was unacceptable. There was no reason in the world why St. John was a thriving community that was destroyed, just like many Black communities under the Eisenhower administration with the highway. They rolled out this whole highway program, and all of the interstate highways that they were creating with the boom in the auto industry ran through Black communities for the sole purpose to destroy that foundation of collectively working together. In every state in this country where Black people were in the majority, they ran a highway through their community to destroy that foundational base. They did that intentionally. The federal government, when we call this federal government in America, has been diametrically opposed to the existence of Black people in America. And most of us don't realize power, you have to take power. Power is not given. And then I want us to be clear. You got to meet violence with violence. If somebody is going to be violent with you, it's not about turning the other cheek. I don't care if it's a policeman. I don't care if it's whoever it is. If they coming at you like that, you got to be willing to stand on it and die for what you believe in. That's another one of our problems. But the sake of this conversation that we're having, we must be clear. And that's why I want you guys to research it. And I'm hoping I'm encouraging some of you listening. We created some wonderful villages and communities and towns I mentioned. I highlighted a few here. Some of them you guys never knew anything about because you didn't study it. The ones that you guys know about, like you say, the Rosewood, Greenwood, those have been highlighted throughout the years. They were atrocities, but I know most of you guys didn't know anything about Natchez, Mississippi. Like I said, none of you guys knew about the Colfax massacre in 1873 in Louisiana. That was another black town in 1873. A black town was destroyed by white people being jealous in Louisiana, Colfax, Louisiana. And you think about where black people populated in after 1865, running away from that. So we had sense enough to run away from hell, because lynching and being raped and all that, we up out of there. And everywhere we went, again, you got to remember, Native American people. I'm gonna mention Palm Springs right here. Palm Springs, in between 1920 and 1958, Palm Springs, California, where Bing Crosby and Doris Day and Elvis Presley and all them people y'all grew up on watching Your White Lovers. So they was chilling out there. That was their place. But before they got out there, it was native land. And then we got out there in 1920s trying to make something out of nothing. And the fathers that be, or the people that's trying to run everything out there, black people had a community. His name was Lawrence Crosley. He built a black community out in Palm Springs, guys, and the white fathers were so tough they went to Asia and got a Pacific tree, a tresmic tree. Is native of the American continent, the northern continent. It's an invasive species tree. It is not. They don't supposed to be in this part of the world. They wouldn't got a tree and planted the trees to cut off the black community from Doris Day and Bing Crosby and all them kind of people. And just recently, black people came together and they was able to tear them trees down because, again, it was about property value. So on this part of the golf course and everything, you couldn't see in the black community, you got the trees, you couldn't see the mountains or the golf course and all that kind of stuff, right? So the black people were basically cut off by this tree, which act like a wall, right? As soon as they fought, and it took years, it took about 70 years for them to get these trees taken down, black people property skyrocket. You know what I mean? Because it's a high valued area. But that's another example, guys. And this is Palm Springs, California, from 1920 to 1958. His name was Lawrence Crosley. He come from Louisiana. He invented a tee. He also designed a golf course. I know most of you guys in 1889, Dr. Charles Grant invented the golf tee. And again, I'm throwing that in there because so often we don't know our history to know how powerful we have always been as far as creating and being innovative. Another thing I want you guys to go, we was talking earlier about the NAACP. In the inception of the NAACP got a history of being some dogs. Now, in some areas, they capitulated at their detriment, I must say. Even with W.E.B. Du Bois, some of the things they were doing, A. Philip Randolph and them, I did not agree with, but because, again, you got to understand, they went to white schools, they went to Harvard and all that, they white-minded. And so some things that should have taken place didn't take place, but that's neither here nor there for a compromise. But in certain cities, like Monroe, Florida, the head of NAACP there, in 1958, his name was Robert F. Williams. And his story is Negroes with Guns. If any of you guys listening out there, I need y'all to look at that documentary, man. Because his situation, he was the president of the NAACP. A white girl kissed two black boys. Came home, told she kissed two black boys. The family of the white girl get mad and want to kill the 7 and 9-year-old boy that this white girl kissed on her own, on the cheek. And my man for the head of NAACP wasn't buying it. He wasn't buying it. Because what happens in a lot of times when these communities are massacred, you get mobs of people like January the 6th. See, white people have always been able to kill us indiscriminately, like the police do today. They got qualified immunity, so they can kill us and they can go have sex with their wife and eat lunch, and they don't think nothing about it. Because to kill a Negro, you become a hero. So they enjoy killing us. They enjoy it. They love it. And it's so sad that we engage in that kind of insanity because, like today, you guys later on are going to be engaged in such ignorance watching the NFL. When you think about the NFL, guys, the NFL is a non-profit organization and make $168 billion a year and give peanuts to the players. The players are injured, mentally injured, physically, emotionally injured, and they're getting peanuts. Do you know that the NFL would be considered in the global scale as far as income base, is richer than about 5 countries right now with their GNP, $168 billion a year. I've been advocating for 7 years that we boycott the NFL, the NBA, NCAA. The NCAA on their football program make $5.6 billion a year. And most of the players are black, most of the coaches are white. Same thing in the NFL. And I know people will say, well, how dare I say someone shouldn't be able to use their talents to make an income to provide for their family. It's got to be bigger than that. Because the only thing this country understands is money. The only value that we really have as black people in this country is our dollar. The only power we have is our dollar. If we stop spending our dollar today in Flint, Michigan, if we stop paying water bill, gas bill, going to the gas, going to get fuel, and anything that you spend money on, entertainment, food, going to Hooters or strip club, whatever y'all do, cigarettes, drugs, whatever you got, whatever y'all do. If you stop spending your money, if you collectively were smart as far as how you spent your money and where you spent your money, like other groups do, because when you think about the Federalist Society or the Carnegie Enterprise, the Heritage Foundation, these white think tanks have been writing laws and policies for the last 60 years. And that's how you got across the country. All these Republican legislations now, they just copy and paste legislation that they have been researching for 20 and 30 years to roll back the Voting Rights Act, all of the rights from the 60s. They've been constantly rolling those back. They've been rolling back Roe v. Wade. All that's been done intentionally. Even when you think about those 3 Supreme Court justices that sat there and said that Roe v. Wade was law, and they got in there and struck it down. There was a congressional hearing, said they wouldn't touch it, and they dismantled it. And just like when you think about Citizens United, that law in itself. So now, any kind of money can go into a campaign, guys. So if you don't have no money, if you don't have no power, how can we get our agenda to the forefront? We keep wanting to play ball while they cutting off our ball. We keep wanting to rap, sing, jump, and dance and twerk and get eyelashes and get booties. That's what we want to do, and get dreadlocks and all that, running around looking crazy. And then we get mad when we get pulled over or when we get evicted. like they did the other day, a couple of months ago. They're gonna let a carpetbagger come in by 150 houses. Like the housing department didn't know, like Mayor Neely didn't know about how you let a speculator come into your community and land bank allow them to buy a bundle of 150 homes, guys, and give people a certain amount of time to either pay up or get out. See, that's what I'm talking about, power. See, we keep wanting to talk about the city council and what are we doing? You know, a lot of times people want to say, they want to complain, but what are you really doing? When we go down to City Hall, and even at my office, you know, I have a problem with Dewan, you know, brother, good brother, but I don't see the benefit of going down to the City Hall with that buffoonery. He feels we need to have a president down, Black Lives Matter need to be down there and on the forefront, but and what? And be a part of what? What an impact and change is happening. And again, there has to be another way because this way hasn't worked. And if you look at the history of politics in Flint, if some of you guys would look at the history of the politics in Flint and the players, even some of the faces have changed, some have died, many have died, but the goal has been the same, to maintain power and control. And I think that's something that we continue to fold in on each other because we're so small in our thinking, we attack one another. I should be able to say to Neely and have a conversation, I don't agree with this policy. Now, how can we work to change this? Now, he can choose to be arrogant and say, well, you don't have a constituency to make me want to move it. What do you think Johnson told King? Johnson told King, make me do it. Johnson said, good idea. Civil rights, a good idea. Say, make it happen. And King got out there and made it happen. Not just him, but the movement made it happen, guys. That's all I'm saying. It's not no one person can do anything. It's us collectively. That's all I'm trying to say. And for this conversation, when we talk about how and what we have produced in this country, we have been amazing in this country, guys. And that's something we really don't celebrate as Black people. How amazing we continue to be and how amazing we could be if we just study, if we shut our mouths and start doing some work as far as loving one another, forgiving one another, healing one another, and moving with one voice. We could take 2, 3, or 4 things and say, we're going to focus on this. We're going to focus on our children getting opportunities. What that opportunity look like. Okay, the opportunity looks like we need to have team club. We need to have 2 schools right now in Flint that's open 24 hours. That to me, that would be and needs to be fully funded for families, for everything from swimming, home economics, woodshop, skating, roller skating, basketball, everything, mental health at the forefront. 2 schools on certain parts of our city needs to be open 24 hours a day. They can be crisis center, but they need to be environments, safe environments for our children to get off the phones and go into a place that they can walk to, not bus to our Grand Blanc or Flushing, but they can literally walk to, be safe. These kids need to be felt valued. And you can tell, you can look at any country in the world and see how are they relevant. The only way you can notice a country being relevant or proactive is how they care for their children. What are they investing in their children? Because the children are the future. And even a lot of times, powers that be, they say, let the old people die and let the children forget. That way we can control them. We give these little shiny objects and we taking everything they look around, they don't have no rights. And again, we can exploit them. And that's the goal. That's the goal of America, is to exploit you at all costs. And that's something we refuse to get on board to say we're going to change. We got to change some furniture. We really got to change some things around in our lives, guys. And that's what history really does. When you really study history, and I'm hoping some of this information that I share with you guys, so you guys to understand. In Oklahoma alone, there was over 50 towns created after 1865. Guys, that's powerful, man. And then across the country, there were over 1,200. That's power. That's the people not giving up. Like I said, after 1865, the Civil War, or the end of it, because it actually was ended in 1863. But 1865 was when, Juneteenth, that's when the people in Texas found out about it. Black people were enslaved for 2 years, even though emancipation was in 1863. I mean, tell me, guys, it's all about exploitation. So again, when we really don't have to fall out and get mad. What we need to do is get glad and be working to teach one another. Once you teach one another, you reach one another, then we can collectively move together and not be distracted by the shiny object. Now, I do want us to keep in mind that we are living today. History is to inform us as far as how we move forward. And so I'm hoping that some of the information that I shared with you guys was not just for entertainment, that it's for real research and how we can use the Panthers 10-point plan, because it's as relevant today as it was in the 60s. How we really can work on healing one another, forgiving one another, liking one another, how we can ask our men, our Black men to step up more. Our Black women have done so much, but our Black men, our Black children are really, really in a crisis. And it's really because of the parents. We have a lot of our women that are really suffering because they're not getting the help that they need. They're dealing with borderline mental issues along with us men. We are too. I think America needs about 2 or 3 years of some real mental healing. Everyone in America need to be in therapy, because we keep wanting to deny the truth. We want to deny the truth, what we see, what we listen to, what we hear. We want to deny it, and we know it to be true. So when you that's a form of insanity. When you are engaged in a society that is showing you every day you have no value and you accept it, that's a form of insanity. So in closing, I'd like to say I'm hoping that as we move forward, this impact information that I give you guys, different topics I'm going to bring to our community. I'm hoping that, as I said before, there is some interest, because I really don't want to be just wasting time talking and it's not having no impact. What is the impact? How do we scale it? What do the scale look like? What does the benefit look like or not? You know what I mean? How can we be realistic about what do we want? Earlier, my engineer was talking about, leadership and, just being somewhat perturbed. You get perturbed sometimes because you see all these shadows and you don't see no results. So in closing, I'd like to say, again, I'm Hubert Naeem Roberts, Chairman of Black Lives Matter Flint. My number is 810-394-4105, mentorroberts@gmail.com. We're definitely hoping that some of you guys will become members of Black Lives Matter. Again, to get anything done, just like a football team, basketball team, corporate, General Motors, Hurley Hospital, Genesis, it takes a team of us, guys. It takes commitment and people willing to do the work. So again, I'm hoping that you guys got something from this impact. And Wakanda out.
Peace, family.